Hello, this is Shmuel Moshe, and you are listening to the Weekly Parashahcast, the weekly Torah portion podcast where I read the weekly Torah portion and then provide my own interpretation of what I think it all means. This week's portion is Parashah Re'eh, which means see, and begins in Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 26. We'll go ahead and get started. If you'd like to follow along in English, you can do so via Chabad.org, and as always, I'd like to remind everybody I'm not a professional Torah scholar, just somebody who wanted to study the Torah. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and begin on the first portion, chapter 11, verse 26 of Devarim. Behold, I set before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing that you will heed the commandments of the Lord your God which I command you today, and the curse, if you will not heed the commandments of the Lord your God, but turn away from the way I command you this day, to follow other gods which you did not know. And it will be, when the Lord your God will bring you to the land which you come, to possess it, that you shall place those blessing upon Mount Gerizim, and those cursing upon Mount Ebal. Are they not on the other side of the Jordan, way beyond in the direction of the sunset, in the land of the Canaanites, who dwell in the plain opposite Gilgal, near the plains of Moreh? For you are crossing the Jordan, to come to possess the land which the Lord your God is giving you, and you shall possess it and dwell in it, and you shall keep to perform all the statutes and ordinances that I am setting before you today. Chapter 12, verse 1. These are the statutes and ordinances that you shall keep to perform in the land which the Lord your God of your fathers gives you to possess all the days that you live on the earth. You shall utterly destroy from all the places where the nations that you shall possess worship their gods, upon the lofty mountains and upon the hills, and under every lush tree. And you shall tear down their altars, smash their monuments, burn their asherim with fire, cut down the graven images of their gods, and destroy their name from that place. You shall not do so to the Lord your God, but only to the place which the Lord your God shall choose from all your tribes, to set his name there. You shall not inquire after his dwelling and come there. And there you shall bring your burnt offerings, and your sacrifices, and your tithes, and the separation by your hand, and your vows and your donations, and the firstborn of your cattle and of your sheep. And there you shall eat before the Lord your God, and you shall rejoice in all your endeavors, you and your households, as the Lord your God has blessed you. You shall not do as all the things that we do here this day, every man doing what he deems fit. For you have not yet come to the resting place, or to the inheritance which the Lord your God is giving you. And you shall cross the Jordan, and settle in the land the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. And he will give you rest from all your enemies surrounding you, and you will dwell securely. All right, that's the end of the first portion. So quickly, Moses, still giving his farewell address, now he gets into the blessings and curses that he bestows upon the people of Israel. So the first is, if you follow the commandments, you'll be blessed, and if you don't, you'll be cursed. Fairly straightforward. So everything is coming down to this very simple conditional. If you do what you're told, everything's going to be great, but if you don't, it's going to be bad. And when you get there, a couple of things. So first off, make sure you follow all the statutes and ordinances that you're being told, and when you get in there, you're going to destroy all of the idols and things related to pagan gods that are not the God of Israel. So what this means here, it says, tear down their altars, smash their monuments, burn their asherim with fire, cut down the graven images of their gods, and destroy their name from that place. You shall not do so to the Lord your God. So there are two possible interpretations of that sentence, you shall not do so to the Lord your God. The first one I thought of is the previous verse says, tear down the altars, destroy everything, right? And then this next one says, you shall not do so. So maybe that means don't destroy anything that is related to worshiping your God. After all, it's not like it's unheard of that when Abraham was here, did he not always talk about how great God was? So maybe this is saying if you come across anything that glorifies God, specifically the same God, don't do those things to that. Or it's saying, don't do those things that you just destroyed, right? So don't create altars, don't make monuments, don't make trees. That's what asherim are trees from what I've learned about them. So in any case, and of course, don't make graven images, right? So don't do those things to the Lord your God. Only to the place which the Lord your God shall choose. So this is what makes me think that it's the second explanation. You're only going to create these kinds of altars and locations in the specific locations that are designated by God. So make sure you follow these rules clearly. And that location, the ones that you're going to be told, right, only in those locations will you do your offerings and your sacrifices and so on. That will be where it happens. That will be where you eat before the Lord. That is going to be the location, and in doing so, you're going to have a good time. You'll rejoice. And don't do what you're doing now, whatever you feel like doing. No, you're going to, once you get in there, once you have taken the land and inherited it, at that point, you are now beholden to the rules. This is your warning. But, hey, get in there over the Jordan, and not only will you have it good, but you will be given a break from your enemies. God will protect you. Now on to the second portion, chapter 12, verse 11 of Deuteronomy. And it will be that the place the Lord your God will choose in which to establish his name there, you shall bring all that I am commanding you, your burnt offerings and your sacrifices, your tithes and the separation by your hand, and the choice of vows which you will vow to the Lord. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God, you and your sons and your daughters, and your maidservants and your manservants, and the Levite who is within your cities, for he has no portion or inheritance with you. Beware lest you offer up your burnt offerings any place you see, but only in the place the Lord will choose in one of your tribes. There you shall offer up your burnt offerings, and there you shall do all that I command you. However, in every desire of your soul you may slaughter and eat meat in all your cities, according to the blessings of the Lord your God, which he gave you. The unclean and the clean may eat thereof, as the deer and as of the gazelle. However, you shall not eat the blood. You shall spill it on the ground like water. You may not eat within your cities the tithe of your grain, or of your wine, or of your oil, or of the firstborn of your cattle, or of your sheep, or any of your vows that you will vow, or your donations, or separation by your hand. But you shall eat them before the Lord your God, in the place the Lord your God will choose. You, your son, your daughter, your manservant, your maidservant, and the Levite who is in your cities. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God in all your endeavors. Beware lest you forsake the Levite in all your days upon your land. When the Lord your God expands your boundary, as he has spoken to you, and you say, I will eat meat, because your soul desires to eat meat, you may eat meat according to every desire of your soul. If the place the Lord your God chooses to put his name there will be distant from you, you may slaughter of your cattle and of your sheep which the Lord has given you, as I have commanded you, and you may eat in your cities according to every desire of your soul. But as the deer and the gazelle are eaten, so may you eat them. The unclean and the clean alike may eat of them. However, be strong not to eat the blood, for the blood is the soul, and you shall not eat the soul with the flesh. You shall not eat it, you shall spill it on the ground like water. You shall not eat it, in order that it be good for you, and for your children after you, when you do what is proper in the eyes of the Lord. However, your holy offerings which you will have, and your vows you shall carry, and come to the place that the Lord chooses. And you shall make your burnt offerings, the flesh and the blood, upon the altar of the Lord your God. And the blood of your sacrifices shall be poured upon the altar of the Lord your God, and you shall eat the flesh. Keep and hearken to all these words that I command you, that it may benefit you and your children after you, forever, when you do what is good and proper in the eyes of the Lord your God. All right, that's the end of the second portion. So let's quickly recap. When you get to the place, the Holy Land, God is going to tell you exactly where you're going to set up the holy locations. So it says which to establish his name. So it's basically saying these are going to be holy sites where you glorify the Lord. Now, in relation to those are going to be the only places that you do your official offerings. And you're going to rejoice and do all these things with those locations, with both your family, your servants, and even the Levites, because they don't have an inheritance. But don't do it anywhere else. Don't make burnt offerings in any random place, only in the designated locations. That is where you're going to do it. However, if you want to eat meat in your cities, according to the blessing of the Lord, you can do so. The unclean and the clean may eat thereof, as of the deer and as of the gazelle, but not the blood. So he's basically saying, even if you do eat meat in the cities, which you're allowed to do, you have to make sure you drain the blood and not eat the blood, because as it says, the blood is, the life of the blood is the soul, etc. So don't drink the blood. Make sure you pour it out. Also, it specifies you may not eat within your cities the tithe of your grain, of your wine, or your oil, the firstborn, etc. So these are all things, these tithes and these other things are on this list. These are things that are supposed to be offered to God. They're supposed to be specifically for the Lord. So it doesn't say that you can't have these things outside of the tithe, right? So you can have your grain and eat it too, but not the portion of it that's for the Lord. That portion has to go to the right place. You shall eat them before the Lord your God, right? So you're going to do this in front of the location that is designated by these commands. So once again, you can't touch those things unless you're doing it in the officially sanctioned location. Cool. When the Lord your God expands your boundary as he has spoken to you, and you say, I will eat meat, you may eat meat. There you go. And it also says, if the place the Lord your God chooses to put his name there will be distant from you, you may slaughter of your cattle and of your sheep, which the Lord has given you, as I have commanded you, and you may eat in your cities according to every desire of your soul. So once again, affirming if the holy location is just way too far for you to travel to it, you're still allowed to eat it, but make sure you drain the blood, for the blood is the soul. You shall not eat the soul with the flesh. So once again, spill it on the ground like water. That is the rule, and by doing so, it will make it okay for you to eat. Just make sure you drain that blood. However, holy offerings and vows, those have to go to the designated location. Burnt offerings, that will be upon the altar. So, and also the blood of your sacrifices, likewise, shall be upon the altar. Keep and hearken to these words, and it's going to be a good time, once again. So here we just have some clarifications, right? We kind of see some more on the rules, but it's very clear. Anything that's designated as for God, even if it's far away, it belongs in the proper location. So you can't just do it casually at home. And this is a danger, right? Because maybe you start doing these things on your own time. Well, now you don't know if the person's doing it actually for the sake of some foreign god, right? So that's why it's important to make sure that all these things are done in the exact designated location. Now moving on to chapter 12, verse 29, the third portion of Deuteronomy. Re'eh. When the Lord your God cuts off the nations to which you will come to drive them out from before you, and when you drive them out and dwell in their land, beware lest you be attracted after them, after they are exterminated from before you, and lest you inquire about their gods, saying, How did these nations serve their gods? And I will do likewise. You shall not do so to the Lord, for your God. For every abomination to the Lord which he hates they did to their gods, and for also their sons and their daughters they would burn in fire to their gods. Chapter 13, verse 1, Everything I command you that you shall be careful to do it. You shall neither add to it nor subtract from it. If there will arise among you a prophet or a dreamer of a dream, and he gives you a sign or wonder, and the sign or the wonder of which he spoke to you happens, and he says, Let us go after other gods which you have not known, and let us worship them. You shall not heed the words of that prophet or that dreamer of a dream, for the Lord your God is testing you, to know whether you really love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. You shall follow the Lord your God and fear him, keep his commandments, heed his voice, worship him, and cleave to him. And that prophet or that dreamer of a dream shall be put to death, because he spoke falsehood about the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, and who redeemed you from the house of bondage, to lead you astray from the way in which the Lord your God commanded you to go. So shall you clear away the evil from your midst. If your brother, the son of your mother, tempts you in secret, or your son or your daughter, or the wife of your embrace, or your friend who is as your own soul, saying, Let us go and worship other gods, which neither you nor your forefathers have known, of the gods of the peoples around you, whether near to you or far from you, from one end of the earth to the other end of the earth, you shall not desire him, and you shall not hearken to him. Neither shall you pity him, have mercy upon him, nor shield him. But you shall surely kill him. Your hand shall be the first against to put him to death. And afterwards the hand of all the people. And you shall stone him with stones, so that he dies, because he sought to lead you astray from the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. And all Israel shall listen and fear, and they shall no longer do any evil such as this in your midst. If you hear in one of your cities, which the Lord your God is giving you to dwell therein, saying, Unfaithful men have gone forth from among you, and have led the inhabitants of their city astray, saying, Let us go worship other gods which you have not known, then you shall inquire, investigate, and ask thoroughly. And behold, it is true, the matter is certain, that such abomination has been committed in your midst. You shall surely strike down the inhabitants of that city with the edge of the sword, destroy it with all that is in it, and its livestock with the edge of the sword. And you shall collect all its spoil into the midst of its open square, and burn with fire the city and all its spoil, completely, for the Lord your God, and it shall be a heap of destruction forever, never to be rebuilt. And nothing that is doomed to destruction shall cling to your hand, so that the Lord may return from his fierce wrath, and grant you his compassion, and be compassionate with you, and multiply you, as he swore to your forefathers. For you shall hearken to the voice of the Lord your God, to keep all his commandments which I command you this day, to do that which is proper in the eyes of the Lord your God. All right, so that's the end of the third portion. So once again, time to recap. Let's go ahead to the very top here. So first off, as it says, when the Lord takes you into the land to drive out those other nations, don't follow after them. You're watching them and you're seeing them get destroyed, but then don't start wondering about how they used to do their worship of gods, right? How did these nations serve their gods? I will do likewise. Don't do that. Bad idea, right? Because what it says here, every abomination to the Lord which he hates, they did to their gods. For also their sons and their daughters they would burn in fire to their gods. So human sacrifice, child sacrifice, no good. But also just all the things that God hates, they would do these things to their gods. So if God hates one thing, they would do it in honor of their own gods or before their gods. So basically, this is why they had to be destroyed. Don't go following after their methods, you're going to suffer. Now, also, chapter 13, verse 1, we get right into it. Everything I command that you shall be careful to do, do it. Do not add to it, do not subtract from it. So don't go adding your own rules. Once again, this is very important. Here is a warning as well. If there will arise among you a prophet or a dreamer of a dream, right? So remember, Joseph had dreams, and you have people who are coming with prophecies who hear from God, right? So if a person shows up and says, I have this divine dream, and then after they show you this miracle, he then goes, now that I've shown you I've got these powers, let's go commit heresy. Don't listen to him. In fact, do the opposite. Kill him. Go out of your way. Make sure that you kill him, because he's actually here to test you. And in doing so, you will pass the test by not following him and breaking God's commandments. But if you do fail, God's going to be unhappy. So just remember, this miracle that God is allowing to happen, God is only doing that to see if you'll pass the test. So don't fall for it. Then we also see if your brother or son of your mother, anyone, so if anyone close to you, and it goes down the whole list. If they say, let's go worship other gods, which neither you nor your forefathers have known, right? So once again, this is kind of significant because you nor your forefathers. So, you'd say like, well, who are your forefathers? This is referring to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So let's say you're a convert and you come from a family that had foreign gods. This would not apply to you because this is about the forefathers who are Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? So these other gods are not the gods of your forefathers anymore. Your forefathers would be simply the God of Israel worshippers. Anyway, don't fall for it. And it's very specific, which is very interesting because we see about the boundary that is the Holy Land, the Promised Land. But in this case, it says from one end of the earth to the other end of the earth. So this means the entire world's gods. Don't fall for it, no matter what. Don't desire him. Don't care for him. Don't hearken to him. Don't take pity on him. Have mercy on him. Don't even shield him. Kill him. In fact, if your friend does this, whoever it is, no matter who they are to you, you should be the first one to kill him before anybody else gets a chance to. Why? Because they tried to lead you astray, and that is absolutely unacceptable. So now, another thing, when it comes to a whole city, so this even goes further. So let's say that test that we just had, the guy says, oh, let me lead you astray, and then you say, okay, but then it happens to everybody in your city. Well, then the report comes back and says, okay, we got problems. It turns out everybody in that city is now a heretic. Well, no problem. What we're going to do is we're going to investigate the matter, determine if it's true, and then we're going to kill them all. Right? So when I say no problem, I mean to say that there is a precedent for what you're supposed to do. In the event of heretical cities, make sure that it's true, and then kill them all. But make sure you thoroughly confirm it. So it says, do your due diligence. Don't just be like, oh, really? Let's go kill them all. No, before you go culling the city and purging it, you need to make sure it's 100% true. So after that, take all the spoils of the city, everything they had worth offering, the cattle, the treasures, whatever, and then burn it. It shall be a heap of destruction forever, never to be rebuilt. Nothing that is doomed to destruction shall cling to your hand, so that the Lord may return from his fierce wrath and grant you compassion and be compassionate with you and multiply you. So in other words, if you walk away having destroyed these things, with none of it stuck to you, then the anger that God had will not be on you. But this is also a double-edged warning, right? So it says by letting, not having it attached to you, then God will do the opposite. He'll be good to you. So remember that means if you do keep some of the loot for yourself, then it's going to still be attached to you, which means God will do the opposite of the good thing. He's going to punish you just like he was going to punish them. And another reminder, make sure you listen to these commands. Now on to the fourth portion, chapter 14, verse 1. You are the children of the Lord your God. You shall neither cut yourselves nor make any baldness between your eyes for the dead. For you are a holy people to the Lord your God, and the Lord has chosen you to be a treasured people for him out of all the nations that are upon the earth. You shall not eat any abomination. These are the animals that you may eat: ox, lamb, and kid, gazelle, deer, and antelope, ibex, chamois, bison, and giraffe. And every animal that has a split hoof and has a hoof cloven into 2 hoof sections, and chews the cud among the animals that you may eat. But you shall not eat of those that chew the cud, or of those that have the split hooves, the cloven one, the camel, the hyrax, and the hare, for they chew the cud, but do not have split hooves. They are unclean for you. And the pig, because it has a split hoof, but does not chew the cud, it is unclean for you. You shall neither eat of their flesh, nor touch their carcass. These you may eat of all that are in the waters. All that have fins and scales you may eat. But whatever does not have fins and scales you shall not eat. It is unclean for you. You may eat every clean bird, but these are from those that you shall not eat: the eagle or the griffin vulture, the ossifrage, the osprey, and the white vulture, and the black vulture, and the kite after its species, and every raven after its species, and the ostrich, and the owl, and the gull, and the hawk after its species, the falcon, and the ibis, and the bat, and the pelican, and the magpie, and the cormorant, and the stork, and the heron and its species, and the hoopoe, and the otelef. And every flying insect is unclean for you, they may not be eaten. You may eat any clean fowl. You shall not eat any carcass. You may give it to the stranger who is in your cities, that he may eat it, or you may sell it to a foreigner. For you are a holy people to the Lord your God. You shall not cook a kid in its mother's milk. That's the end of the fourth portion. So quickly going down the line here, it says, don't cut yourselves nor make any baldness between your eyes for the dead. So, maybe if people were to slice open their flesh, or baldness, shave off their eyebrows, baldness between their eyes, or shave their heads. So don't do that when someone dies. You're a holy people, so don't do that. Also, don't eat abominable things. We got a long list of what animals are okay and not okay to eat. The classic, simple example, if it chews the cud and has a split hoof, you're good. But if it does not do both, if it's one and not the other, then it's unclean. Fish can have fins and scales, so if it's from the water and has fins and scales, you're good. Flying insects, no go. Several birds, no go. Nonetheless, there are a lot of options here. We can read them again for the specifics. Don't eat any carcass. However, you can give it to the stranger, and you can sell it to a foreigner. So in this case, it's basically saying that you can use it in those ways, but not eat it yourself. And a reminder, do not cook a kid in its mother's milk. Humane or inhumane. Contextual. Don't do that. On to the fifth portion, chapter 14, verse 22 of Deuteronomy. You shall tithe all the seed crop that the field gives forth, year by year. And you shall eat before the Lord your God in the place he chooses to establish his name therein, the tithes of your grain, your wine, and your oil, and the firstborn of your cattle and of your sheep, so that you may learn to fear the Lord your God all the days. And if the way be long for you, you are unable to carry it, for the place which the Lord your God will choose to establish his name therein is too far from you, for the Lord your God will bless you, then you shall turn it into money, and bind up the money in your hand, and you shall go to the place the Lord your God will choose, and you shall turn that money into whatever your soul desires, cattle, sheep, new wine, or old wine, or whatever your soul desires, and you shall eat there before the Lord your God, and you shall rejoice, you and your household. And as for the Levite who is in your cities, you shall not forsake him, for he has neither portion nor inheritance with you. At the end of the 3 years, you shall take out all the tithe of your crop in that year and place it in your cities. And the Levite, because he has no portion or inheritance with you and the stranger, and the orphan and the widow who are in your cities, will come and eat and be satisfied, so that the Lord your God will bless you in all the work of your hand that you will do. That's the end of the fifth portion. So a quick summary, you're going to get year by year, you're going to have a tithe, and you're going to bring that to the Lord, right? So you shall eat before the Lord and make the tithe of grain, wine, oil, firstborn of the cattle and sheep, etc. And then it also says, don't worry, if the holy land that you have to go to, if this place where God's been established is too far for you to move all of your cattle, not a problem. You're going to sell the items, bring the money to that land, to wherever God's altars are. Then you're going to use that money to purchase the things to make those sacrifices and offerings. So in other words, if you can't afford or the distance is too far, it's not a problem so long as you use the money from selling those crops to immediately use them for the same thing. So it's like, it's almost like, here, hold this cash for me for a little bit, and then, you just swap the cash for the same item on the other end. So it's really just a matter of convenience. The classic money-changing table, right? You hear about that in certain biblical contexts within one book, right? But this is why that sort of thing was very important. You needed a means to be able to take the money and purchase the thing that you want to sacrifice, right? Why would I travel across the entire land with a bunch of animals that could get hurt or whatever, and it's going to cost me a ton of money? Or I can just travel by myself, bring some money that I got for selling the cattle, and then use that money to buy the equivalent at the holy site. Just makes more sense. And it's equal at the end of the day. So turn the thing into money, bring the money with you, and then use that money to buy whatever you want that you're going to sacrifice to the Lord. I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to spend the same money, right? What's worth more, $100 of wine or $100 of cattle? It's still $100 at the end of the day, or shekels in this case. And don't forget the Levites. Also, at the end of 3 years, take all the tithe of the crop and place it in your cities. And this is for the Levites as well as the poor and the widow and the orphan and so on, the stranger. They'll have the chance to come and eat, and that will make God happy. Now on to the sixth portion, chapter 15, verse 1 of Devarim, Deuteronomy. At the end of 7 years you will make a release. And this is the manner of the release, to release the hand of every creditor from what he lent his friend. He shall not exact from his friend or his brother, because time of the release for the Lord has arrived. From the foreigner you may exact, but what is yours with your brother, your hand shall release. However, there will be no needy among you, for the Lord will surely bless you in the land your Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance to possess. However, if you hearken to the voice of the Lord your God, to be careful to do all this commandment which I am commanding you today, for the Lord your God has blessed you as he spoke to you, and you will lend to many nations, but will not borrow, and you will rule over many nations, but they will not rule over you. If there will be among you a needy person from one of your brothers in one of your cities, and in the land of the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not harden your heart, and you shall not close your hand from your needy brother. Rather you shall open your hand to him, and you shall lend him sufficient for his needs, which he is lacking. Beware lest there be in your heart an unfaithful thought, saying, the 7th year, the year of the release, has approached, and you will begrudge your needy brother and not give him. And he will cry out to the Lord against you, and it will be a sin to you. You shall surely give him, and your heart shall not be grieved when you give to him. For because of this thing the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and in all your endeavors. For there will never cease to be needy within the land. Therefore I commend you, saying, you shall surely open your hand to your brother, to the poor one, and to your needy one in your land. If your brother, a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, is sold to you, he shall serve you for 6 years, and it is in the 7th year you shall send him forth free from you. And when you send him forth free from you, you shall not send him forth empty-handed. You shall surely provide him from your flock, your threshing floor, and from your vat. You shall give him from what the Lord your God has blessed you. And you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. Therefore I am commanding you this thing today. And it will be if he says to you, I will not leave you, because he loves you in your household, for it is good for him with you. Then you shall take an awl, and put it through his ear and into the door, and he shall be a servant to you forever. And also to your maidservant you shall do likewise. You shall not be troubled when you send him free from you. For twice as much as a hired servant he has served you 6 years, and the Lord your God will bless you in all that you shall do. All right, that's the end of the 6th portion. So now we get into the matter of debts and slavery. So first up, every 7 years, you're going to forgive all debt, basically. So if it's a Hebrew, a brother, right, a brother of yours in the Hebrew context, and you lend to him, it is forgiven at the end of that 7-year period. So keep an eye out for that. Now, interestingly, it also says, let's say you see a guy and he needs your help, give it to him. And don't get upset because you know that you're about to forgive the debt, right? I'm about to lend him the money right before the debt forgiveness thing. Well, God says, don't hate him for that, because if you begrudge him, then he's going to feel bad and he's going to cry out to God for help, and I'm going to take it out on you. So instead, give it to him anyway. Feel good about it, because I'm going to bless you. God will bless you for doing the right thing. Now, an interesting note here as well. He says that you will lend to many nations, but you will not borrow. You will rule over many nations, but they will not rule over you. So we're establishing now that the Hebrews will lend to other people. And also it notes that when you forgive the debt, you only do that within the community. So you can exact what is owed to you by a foreigner, by outsiders, but within the people, there's no debt to maintain. And this is an interesting historical piece, because if we look at the history of the Jews throughout all history from antiquity to now, there were a lot of time periods where this was a very critical part of the Jewish experience. Being moneylenders was kind of the iconic role of the Jew, and even during the Napoleonic age, a little side note, he actually outlawed it. Usury in all forms was outlawed, and this caused like a huge uproar within the French Jewish community anywhere in the French Empire. But that's a tale for another day. My point is, there is a biblical pretense for being a moneylender to people outside of the Jewish nation, but within, you forgive the debt, you let it go, and know that you will be blessed for having provided for your brother. And the other thing here is about slavery, right? So when your slave leaves you, he's going to be your slave for 6 years, and on year 7, he'll go free. You're going to make sure that you don't send him off empty-handed. You're going to give him the best of the best. You're going to give him not necessarily the best of your things, but you will give him from yours, from your cattle, your various things that are yours. You'll make sure that he goes off with something good. But if he says, I know I'm free, but I love being your slave and I want to stay, that's allowed. And if he commits to that, then man or woman, they will become yours forever. They will have an ear piercing that ties them to the doorpost, and they will become your forever slave. So, also remember this, when you set the slave free, don't feel bad because he served you well. Also remember, you're going to be blessed for all of this, and also remember everything else. We always go back to the classic, I was a slave in Egypt, right? Remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and do the same for them. So now we go on to the 7th and final portion, chapter 15, verse 19 of Devarim. Let's jump right in. Every firstborn male that is born of your cattle or of your flock you shall sanctify to the Lord your God. You shall neither work with the firstborn of your ox, nor shear the firstborn of your flock. You shall eat it before the Lord your God year by year in the place the Lord chooses you and your household. And if there be any blemish in it, whether it be lame or blind, or any ill blemish, you shall not sacrifice it to the Lord your God. You shall eat it within your cities, the unclean and the clean together, as the deer and as the gazelle. However, you shall not eat its blood. You shall pour it on the ground as water. Chapter 16, verse 1. Keep the month of spring, and make the Passover offering to the Lord your God. For in the month of spring the Lord your God brought you out of Egypt at night. You shall slaughter the Passover sacrifice to the Lord your God of the flock, and the festival sacrifices of the cattle, in the place which the Lord will choose to establish his name therein. You shall not eat leaven with it. For 7 days you shall eat it with matzah, the bread of affliction. For in haste you went out of the land of Egypt, so that you shall remember the day when you went out of the land of Egypt all the days of your life. And no leaven shall be seen with you within all your border for 7 days, neither shall any of the flesh you slaughter on the preceding day in the afternoon remain all night until morning. You shall not sacrifice the Passover offering within any of your cities which the Lord your God is giving you, except at the place which the Lord your God will choose to establish his name. There you shall slaughter the Passover offering in the afternoon as the sun sets, at the appointed time that you went out of Egypt. And you shall roast it and eat it in the place which the Lord your God will choose. And you shall turn away in the morning and go to your dwellings. For 6 days you shall eat matzah, and on the 7th day there shall be a halt to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work on it. You shall count 7 weeks for yourself. From the time the sickle is first put to the standing crop, you shall begin to count 7 weeks. And you shall perform the festival of weeks to the Lord your God, the donation you can afford to give, according to how the Lord your God shall bless you. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God, you and your son and your daughter, and your manservant and your maidservant, and the Levite who is within your cities, and the stranger and the orphan and the widow who are among you, in the place which the Lord your God will choose to establish his name therein. And you shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and you shall keep and perform these statutes. You shall make for yourself the festival of Sukkot for 7 days, where you gather the produce from your threshing floor and your vat. And you shall rejoice in your festival, you and your son and your daughter, and your maidservant and your manservant, and the Levite and the stranger, and the orphan and the widow who are within your cities. 7 days you shall celebrate the festival to the Lord, your God, in the place which the Lord shall choose, because the Lord your God will bless you in all your produce, and in all the work of your hands you will only be happy. 3 times in the year, every one of your males shall appear before the Lord, your God, in the place he will choose, on the festival of Matzot, and on the festival of weeks, and on the festival of Sukkot, and he shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed. Every man shall bring as much as he can afford, according to the blessing of the Lord your God, which he has given you. End of 7th portion. So, quickly recap. Beginning here, the firstborn of your cattle, the firstborn male, right? It's not for you to use for work, it's for God. So the firstborn of what's yours shall always be given to God first, and then after that, what you get is yours. Make sure you eat it before the Lord in the place that God has chosen, you and your household. But if it's got any problems, if it's lame or anything like that, then do not sacrifice it to the Lord. You'll eat it within your cities, the clean and the unclean, as always. But always remember to pour out the blood. Then we get our reminders about Passover. So all the necessary things you need to remember about Passover. And then continuing there, the festivals that follow, right? The Festival of Weeks. We have information about things like Shavuot. Rejoice before the Lord, you and your God and your daughter and your manservant and maids. Everybody rejoice together, but do it at the place that God designates. So again, make sure you're going to the official designated location. And remember, you were slaves in Egypt. Festival for Sukkot, 7 days where you gather in the produce and so on. And then, of course, enjoy the festival as you are commanded, you and everybody around you. And then 3 times a year, right? So we've got the Festival of Matzah, the Festival of Weeks, and on the Festival of Sukkot, men are to appear before the Lord in those designated locations, and they will do so with an offering commensurate, appropriate for their financial ability. With that, we are at the end of the portion. So, all in all, this is very interesting stuff. This is the blessings and the curses portion of Moses' farewell address. And it's very important because, again, Moses is really binding these statements by saying that these are a blessing and a curse. And he separates the people by the mountains so they can kind of see option A, blessing, option B, curse. What do you choose? So everything he says here, he basically is telling everybody how to get blessed and what will lead to blessings and what doing wrong leads to curses. So this is a very, very important warning because Moses himself is basically condemning anybody to a curse or blessing them for whatever good things they do after this moment henceforth. And because he's saying it all, there's really no wiggle room here. This is how it's going to be. In any case, that's it for this week's portion. Very intense stuff, but now you know why it's got to be a certain way. And Moses himself, even though he doesn't benefit from being able to cross over the land, he will still leave this final note to honor the Lord above and make sure that the people know, don't mess around. Until next time, this has been Shmuel Moshe with the Weekly Parashahcast. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you learned something new or found it interesting. And until the very next episode, I hope you'll be tuning in again. Until then, Baruch Hashem.